If you've spent the last few evenings scrolling through endless monitor specs, watching the same YouTube breakdowns, and still feel like you're stuck between "I need color accuracy" and "I can't afford to waste money on a fancy screen that ends up gathering dust," this review is going to clear that up for you. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've been talking to a handful of freelance photographers, a couple of indie video editors, and even a game dev studio that recently upgraded their workstations, so I think I have a decent sense of where the ASUS ProArt PA32 UCE actually lands in a real-world workflow. First off, let's talk about why you might be hesitating. A 32-inch 4K panel sounds like a dream for anyone who needs a lot of screen real estate, but the price tag on a ProArt branded model can feel like a gamble. You're basically paying for a promise of factory-calibrated color, HDR capability, and a built-in colorimeter that claims to keep the display spot on without a separate device. The question is, does that promise translate into day-to-day productivity, or are you just buying a glossy badge? If you spend the bulk of your day adjusting exposure curves in Lightroom, matching skin tones in DaVinci Resolve, or rendering product renders that will be viewed on a client's calibrated monitor, the PA32 UCE's 98% DCI-P3 coverage and 100% sRGB reach become tangible benefits. In my conversations with a portrait photographer, she said that after moving from a standard 27-inch monitor to this 31.5-inch panel, she could see subtle banding that previously slipped past her eye. The wider color gamut meant fewer guess-and-check trips back to the camera raw files, shaving roughly 10 minutes off each batch edit. That might not sound like a lot, but over a week of 200 photos, you're saving over half an hour, a real productivity gain you can bill to a client. The built-in motorized colorimeter is where the ProArt line really tries to differentiate itself. Instead of buying a separate X-Rite or data color device and wrestling with software, you can trigger an auto-calibration from the monitor's OSD. For a solo freelancer, that's a convenience factor that translates into less downtime. A small design studio I spoke with runs 2 laptops on the same desk. They use the auto KVM switch that lets them toggle the monitor's input with a single button press. No more fumbling with HDMI cables or losing focus while swapping devices. In practice, it means a smoother handoff when a teammate needs to step in for a quick proof, which is a subtle but appreciated workflow win. Now, let's get into the practical downsides that often get glossed over in marketing copy. First, the monitor is a heavyweight at 32 inches with a fairly deep stand. If you have a compact desk, you'll need to clear a decent amount of space just to get a comfortable viewing distance, ideally about 2 feet, to avoid eye strain at 4K resolution. Second, the panel's 600 nits peak brightness is great for HDR, but it also means you'll notice a noticeable difference between the HDR mode and the regular SDR mode. Switching between the two can feel like a step down, especially if you're used to monitors that maintain a more consistent luminance across modes. Third, the response time isn't geared toward high-fs gaming. The IPS panel has a typical 9 milliseconds gray-to-gray transition, so fast-moving action scenes may show a bit of ghosting. If you plan to game on this monitor, you'll likely need to dial back the visual fidelity settings or accept a less buttery experience. Pricing is another factor that can make you pause. The PA32 UCE sits in the high-end professional tier, so it's not a casual office upgrade. However, the value proposition isn't just the headline specs, it's the bundled calibration workflow, the USB-C power delivery that can charge a laptop at 96W, and the fact that ASUS includes 3 years of warranty, which is above the industry average. For a photographer who would otherwise spend $200 on a separate colorimeter and another $400 on a monitor, the combined cost is still competitive when you factor in the convenience and time savings. Who should buy this? If you are a color-critical professional photographers, video editors, graphic designers, or anyone working in pre-press where accurate DCI-P3 coverage is a non-negotiable, this monitor checks the boxes. It also makes sense for developers who need a large, crisp workspace for UI design and want a reliable way to test color themes across the gamut. The built-in calibration and auto KVM features also make it attractive for multi-device setups, such as a laptop plus a desktop, or a workstation that toggles between a Windows machine and a MacBook. Who should skip it? If your primary use case is gaming, office spreadsheets, or streaming video at standard dynamic range, you'll likely find cheaper options that meet those needs without the premium. Likewise, if you're constrained by desk space or have a very tight budget, the size and price could become a hassle. For students or hobbyists who are just getting into content creation, a 27-inch monitor with decent color coverage might be a more sensible stepping